All right. Well, I know everyone's still joining in, but we'll get started. We'll kick it off. I want to make sure we have a lot to cover, so we have plenty of time for everyone to hear from our amazing panelists and guests tonight. So, good evening, everyone. My name's Chintan Patel. I'm the Executive Director of Indian American Impact and South Asian Impact Foundation. As an organization, we're proud to be building South Asian political power and transforming our communities from the ground up. Specifically through our 501(c)(3 South Asian Impact Foundation, we're focusing on cultivating civic engagement, developing leadership, and uniting our diaspora as a powerful force for change. It's truly incredible to be in community with all of you this evening to discuss such an important topic. Based on registrations, just briefly, I want to share this. We have attendees joining tonight from over 25 states, highlighting just how top of mind immigration is for our community across the country right now. As everyone knows, these are incredibly uncertain times for immigrants and their families. It feels like every day brings a new policy, a court ruling, and a detention case with serious implications for our communities. Over the past few months, we've heard so many questions from people in our neighborhoods, in our communities. Should my green card holding relatives avoid traveling? What if my student visa is revoked? What if I'm questioned at the airport? It can feel paralyzing, and we know many of you are trying to make impossible decisions with limited information. So that's why we're here tonight, to provide clarity, context, and community. Also, we're proud to officially launch a new series tonight, Desi Dialogues, as you're seeing on your screen. Desi Dialogues is a space for timely, solutions-focused conversations on the most urgent issues facing South Asian Americans. So please be sure to follow Impact to stay informed about both virtual and in-person events that will be coming up in the weeks and months ahead. We're beginning tonight on immigration because the stakes are deeply personal and immediate. Tonight, you'll hear from experts on birthright citizenship case before the Supreme Court, wrongful deportations, student visa revocations, and Bhutanese refugee displacement. We'll follow that up with a practical know your rights breakdown and a live Q&A. I want to note a few housekeeping things before we get to our special guests. This event is closed to press, and then throughout the event, please use the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen to submit questions. Some of them will be answered in writing, but others will be answered live during our Q&A session. So, without further ado, to begin tonight's program, we're honored to welcome a true friend of the South Asian American community, Maryland Senator Chris Van Hollen. Many of you know him from recent weeks as a fierce advocate for immigrant rights. But what you may not know is how deeply connected he is to South Asia. Senator Van Hollen was actually born in Karachi, Pakistan, and spent part of his childhood attending school in India. He is a United States citizen because of birthright citizenship, and his parents were both deeply involved in strengthening U.S. relationships with South Asian countries. So whether it's fighting for fair immigration policies or standing with impacted families, he's consistently used this platform to advocate for our communities. He was the first member of Congress to visit Kilmar Abrigo Garcia, a Maryland resident who was wrongfully deported to El Salvador, and he led calls for due process and accountability in immigration enforcement. He's also been closely tracking the Supreme Court case on birthright citizenship, which had oral arguments just last week. So we're grateful for his leadership and his presence with us tonight. Please join me in welcoming Senator Chris Van Hollen. Thank you, Senator.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay, Chintan?
Yes.
All right. Well, first of all, let me thank you for launching these conversations at this very consequential time. And I appreciate the chance to be with you and the other panelists and others on this call. As you indicated, I have a deep affection for South Asia. In addition to having lived in India and Pakistan, I also spent a lot of time in Sri Lanka and traveled throughout South Asia. So I'm really glad that you're convening this group to specifically now talk about the threats to the community because of these assaults on the Constitution. And I questioned Secretary Rubio today in the Senate Foreign Relations Committee on many of these issues. I will focus my comments on the due process right attack and the birthright citizenship, but I know you're going to speak later on the panel about these attacks on the First Amendment and the fact that we have students at college campuses, some of who are green card holders and others who have, student visas who have been essentially snatched up because they expressed their First Amendment rights and have been dispatched to detention centers in places like Louisiana and Texas and others. So we have a full-on assault on the First Amendment when it comes to political expression on college campuses. We have the issues you mentioned with respect to what's happening at airports, which is absolutely unacceptable. And we need to rein in that arbitrary authority of people trying to check people's cell phones for, again, political expression. And then, of course, there's the attack on due process. And Kilmar Abrego Garcia was a guy who was legally in Maryland. He had legal status. He had a work permit. He worked as an apprentice with sheet metal workers. And he was driving with his 5-year-old son who has autism. And he was snatched up by federal agents. He was sent first to Baltimore, then to Texas. He was then handcuffed and shackled and put on an airplane where he had no idea where he was going. And he ended up in this notorious prison in El Salvador, this gulag of a prison called SCOTUS, reserved for terrorists, people who have been convicted of terrorism. And the Trump administration admitted in federal court that they had wrongfully detained and deported Kilmar Abrego Garcia. They admitted it. They said it was a, quote, an administrative error. That was their term. But instead of fixing the problem, they fired the lawyer who told the truth in court. And as we gather now, they're ignoring a 6-0, a 9-0 Supreme Court order to facilitate his return. And the fact that they have not yet complied, the Trump administration, means that we're at a very serious inflection point in terms of the rule of law in our country. And so this is why so many of us are focused on this case. It's why I went to El Salvador to meet with Abrego Garcia, both to see if he was alive, because his wife and mother and brother, who all live in Maryland, had no idea what happened to him. And frankly, we don't know what's happened to him since I met with him. I'm the only one to have met with him to date since he was abducted. And I, wanted to talk to the El Salvadorian authorities as well, who admitted that the only reason they were holding him was because the Trump administration, the U.S. government, is paying them money to detain him. So President Trump has admitted that he could just pick up the phone and facilitate his return, which is what the court has ordered. And again, the fact that the Trump administration has refused to do it is really taking us to this boiling point when it comes to compliance with Supreme Court orders. I'll just a note to bring you up to date on where the case is. The federal district court judge has found that the administration's claim that they can't share with the judge, can't share with the court information because it undermines the State Secret Act. The judge has said that that's just a flimsy, made-up story. And so that's where things stand right now. But I've made the point from the beginning that this is not about Abrego Garcia, the man. This is about his due process rights, because if you attack his due process rights, if you take away his due process rights, you do jeopardize them for everybody who lives in America, whether it's the South Asian community or any other community. And so that's why we need to fight this so hard. We also need to make sure that on the birthright citizenship issue, which the Supreme Court just heard, there are two separate questions. One is the merits of the case. And, there's a long body of constitutional law supporting the idea of birthright citizenship. One of the things the Trump administration is trying to do right now, though, is use that case to stop nationwide injunctions, right? This is when a federal district court judge finds that there's been a violation of the Constitution. That judge has the power currently to say, you're violating the Constitution. You not only have to stop doing this in our particular jurisdiction, but across the country. And what the Trump administration is focused on right now in that case is to try to prevent that from happening, which would mean that the Trump administration could violate people's due process rights and birthright citizenship rights for a long time before the law could actually catch up with them if you disallow these nationwide injunctions to be issued by federal district court judges. So let me stop there. I can go on, of course, but I want to make sure that I focus on the issues that are most relevant. I do want to introduce my head of my district office in Maryland, Ashima Talwar, who's here, as well as other members of my team. But thank you, Chetan, and I look forward to the conversation.
Amazing. Thank you, Senator. I know you might be short on time, but if you could take, we had a couple of questions that did come in, so I want to
absolutely
take the
yeah. I
opportunity.
cannot wait till the end for questions, but I can take a few now.
Yeah. Awesome. So thank you again for your leadership on these issues, as you spoke about. This is about more than just the person itself. This is about due process. It's about sort of the foundations of our Constitution, right? And your advocacy, obviously, around the Kilmar case has been so crucial. So for our community members watching, many of whom are eager to help, how can they continue to raise awareness and advocate for Kilmar's return, and specifically for these broader due process protections? What can our community do to speak up to make sure that the constitutional rights of our country, of our foundational, democracy, are protected?
Well, thank you for asking that question, because one of the things that's been very heartening since I got back from El Salvador, and I had no real idea of how all of this would be sort of processed by the public, which is that the American people do understand this importance of due process, right? And they see how denying it to one person does connect to themselves. Now, one of the things that the Trump administration is trying to do is to say, well, those due process rights only apply to American citizens. They don't apply to anybody else. They don't apply to green card holders, right? They don't apply, in the case of the First Amendment, to students. This is a bunch of nonsense. The Supreme Court has held very firmly that those constitutional rights, whether it's birthright citizenship, whether it's due process, whether it's First Amendment, that they apply to all persons residing in the United States. So I think everyone on this call needs to be very armed with the facts to push back on that point, number one. Number two, the Trump administration wants to distract attention. They want to change the subject. They cannot win on the issue of taking away people's due process rights. They recognize that that's a loser. In fact, surveys, public polling has shown that the American people oppose their decision to deny Kilmar Abrego Garcia due process. There's been specific polling on his case, and the American people are not with the Trump administration. And I'm talking about Republicans, Democrats, and independents. But what the Trump administration is trying to do is change the subject. They want to make this all about the idea that you cannot fight gang violence, for example, without trampling on people's due process rights. Well, the reality is that you can do both. In fact, what courts are there for is to punish the guilty after judges hear all the facts under penalty of perjury, not Trump tweets, but also to give due process rights to everybody else. So in the case of Kilmar Abrego Garcia, for example, the Trump administration keeps suggesting like he's a convicted member of MS-13. The reality is that in court, they've never provided any of those facts. In fact, the judge said very specifically, and I'm quoting her, that the administration has provided no evidence of links between Abrego Garcia and MS-13 or any terrorist activity, end quote. That's the place to bring your evidence if they have it. So I'm saying all this because everybody on this call can play a very important role within their communities around the country in making sure people don't try to change the subject and don't try to distort the facts. The facts are crystal clear. The only question is whether or not the Trump administration can deny due process rights to Abrego Garcia. And the Constitution is very clear. A 9-0 decision from the Supreme Court. We don't get many of those. It's crystal clear. No, you cannot do that. And so everybody can help by making sure that they don't change the subject when you're on your social media networks or your professional association networks or any network of people that you're in touch with. These issues come up, and make sure people they cannot change the subject, that they cannot, don't let lies go uncontested, because this is a battle of disinformation coming out of the Trump administration, and the truth of the matter, which is what the courts have been focused on.
Thank you for that. Another question that's come in, as you know, the South Asian American community, or South Asians, are amongst the fastest growing immigrant groups in the United States. Many of them are actually navigating sort of complex visa and asylum systems. What does Kilmar's case, what does the other attacks on due process and our immigration system reveal about the vulnerabilities that that South Asian immigrant community in particular should be paying attention to, in making sure that no one's caught off guard or trapped in some of these enforcements that are happening without due process?
Yeah. So the first thing I would say, and I know you have some attorneys on the call. I think Sheela Murthy's on the call, and others. So number one, if it's a very detailed question on immigration that somebody has, then please check with your immigration lawyers. But that said, this does reveal all sorts of vulnerabilities if you have a lawless president and administration who's willing to override, people's rights. That's the real danger here. The other issue, and there, as you know, immigration law is complicated. So, but when it comes to the whole process for, number one, getting a visa to come here, or transitioning to become a legal permanent resident, and then you're on your path to citizenship, what we've seen is that the Trump administration is willing to sort of disrupt that effort. I mean, one of the best cases here is actually the case of Khalil, the student up at Columbia University, who's a legal permanent resident. His wife is an American citizen. They just had a child while he's been in detention in Louisiana for expressing his First Amendment rights of freedom of speech. And as we all know, under the Constitution, you can agree with someone's speech or disagree with someone's speech, but the government can't punish speech. That's a direct violation of the First Amendment. But to your point, a lot of people said, well, look, he's a green card holder, right? Legal permanent residence. And Rubio's position, it's a lawless position, in my view, is no, I have the authority under this 1950s McCarthy era McCarran-Walter Act provision to declare him a threat to U.S. foreign policy. I will say I beat up on Secretary Rubio on this today, because that is a pathetic claim, obviously, that these student protesters are threatening U.S. foreign policy. But it's an example. It is an example of how far they will go. So it just means everybody needs to be even more aware of their rights and the assaults we're seeing on these rights. So this is why I'm really glad you pulled everybody together here, because this is one of those moments that we all have to stand up together, because what bullies do is they try to pick on people one by one, and they start by picking on people they think are the most vulnerable.
Absolutely. If you'll allow, we have one more question that got
Sure.
submitted. I think this is, it's very important to our community, especially because a lot of members in our community are newer immigrants. A lot of them are mixed status families. As you know, there is a large green card backlog for South Asian Americans who are here on H-1B visas, and the birthright citizenship executive order, the Supreme Court case, the threat to birthright citizenship is of particular concern to the community. Obviously, you talked a little bit about what we heard in the case last week and sort of the two different threads that are being argued. One around these national stop orders, and then the second around the merits of the case. Can you talk a little bit about what a decision ruling against birthright citizenship means in practical terms, and knowing full well that the legal case against it is so thin, what is the Trump administration trying to get at around this birthright citizenship order that we should be aware of?
So I think at one level, this is poisonous politics. I mean, as you pointed out, and I'll talk about in a minute, I mean, the legal case is extremely thin if you look at Supreme Court precedent. So my view is this has been very poisonous politics. It's been part of the Trump playbook for a very long time, which is divide people against one another based on race or ethnicity, and essentially picking on immigrants, right, as sort of the other or un-American. And this notion that, there's this huge invasion of people, and, all of this nonsense. And it's a Democratic conspiracy just to get a bunch of voters, and all part of this political narrative that they've been trying to exploit, around this. And I say that because if you do look at the legal issues, it's pretty clear. And again, you can never know for sure what's going to happen, with any Supreme Court. But if you look at the precedent on all these issues, for example, due process rights applying to everybody who resides in America, that's been a long constitutional tradition. I just cited a case recently where Judge Scalia, very conservative judge who used to be on the court, people remember him, he was said in an opinion, it's absolutely clear that these due process rights apply to everybody in the United States. And the same has been true for the First Amendment. So they're on very thin ice legally to try to throw out birthright citizenship. Now, if they succeed in getting this, preventing these nationwide injunctions, right? What's happened so far, as you know, is that a number of judges, the judges who heard these cases, said this is unconstitutional, right? We're looking at Supreme Court precedent, and it's clear. If you're a person, you're born in the United States, you're a citizen, period. But if you get rid of the ability of a judge who finds that the executive order was unconstitutional, but prevent them from implementing that, their order, preventing the implementation of this nationwide, it means that their decision only applies within their specific narrow jurisdiction of that particular district court. That means somebody else, can go into court in another jurisdiction and forum shop and try to get a different decision. And you raise a really good point. Let's say that you find another judge who decides, oh, I think this is constitutional, this executive order. Now, are kids who are born in that, that court jurisdiction not able to claim citizenship, get papers? I don't know. I'm a little bit out of my, you got some other lawyers here, but one of the reasons that they are focusing in the Supreme Court argument, not on the underlying issue of birthright citizenship, but on trying to prevent nationwide injunctions, is that it slows down the legal process. It slows down people's ability to protect these constitutional rights if you have to go jurisdiction by jurisdiction. Like if you got to go to the federal court district in Southern Maryland and separately to the one in Baltimore, right? It just complicates things. And I think from the Trump legal strategy point of view, they know they're weak on the underlying issue, but if they can slow the whole thing down, then they may make some, in their minds, some wins.
That is, there's a lot to think about there, but we really appreciate all of your thoughts, and you've been incredibly generous with your time. Thank you again for your leadership. Any closing thoughts that you want to share with the community?
Well, only just to underscore the importance of your pulling us all together at this moment in time. And I just think, stepping back from these particular cases, we are looking at this assault on institutions around the country. When colleges and universities don't cave in to the Trump administration demands, they try to punish those colleges and universities. When law firms don't comply with their demands, they try to go after the law firms. So this is an important time for us to stand up for the Constitution, but also to do so for those entities that are being attacked and are on the front lines of this fight, to stand up for the Constitution. So I have tried to make it a big point to applaud the colleges and universities and the law firms that are standing up against this illegal assault, but also to call out those that are folding, because those that capitulate are really hurting all of us, because it just increases the Trump administration's appetite. Every time, they bully some law firm into cutting a deal, it hurts all of us, and it hurts the law firms that are standing up to the Trump administration. It undermines them and undercuts them. So we need to be voices collectively in standing up for those that are resisting this assault on the Constitution.
Amazing. Thank you, Senator, once again for your leadership on immigrant rights for the South Asian American community as well, and for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
Okay. Well, thank you again, Senator. And we have some amazing panelists, lawyers next up. So I'm honored to be joined by another Maryland superstar tonight, Sheela Murthy, who's one of the most respected voices in immigration law today. She is the president and CEO of Murthy Law Firm, an internationally recognized leader in United States immigration, and has clients ranging from Fortune 500 companies to students and families navigating the immigration system for the first time. She's also a passionate philanthropist and co-founder of the Murthy Nayak Foundation, which supports transformative projects for immigrants, women, and children, both here in the United States and in India. And tonight, she'll help us understand what's going on with the wave of student visa revocations and what South Asian students and families need to know. So please help me welcome Sheela Murthy to the call.
Thank you so much, Chintan. Thank you all for joining us for today's discussion. I love the Senator's comments in providing a background of what he's doing on the political front, and really putting everything into context about how the Constitution is the bedrock, the U.S. Constitution is a bedrock that provides us rights and freedoms, and the minute we give it up because of fear or failure to understand or dividing people, that can be extremely dangerous for every one of us. So the issues, I think a couple of issues that we wanted to talk about, of course, was Customs and Border Protection. The student issues, to some extent, I'm happy to touch upon it as well. A lot of the visas that were revoked with no explanation in many of these cases for students, for maybe issues that had occurred years or decades ago, closed cases, dismissed cases, expunged cases, didn't seem to matter. They revoked, it's called a prudential revocation. So they did prevent prudential revocations of visas. And then they went and terminated. That was bad enough. But then they terminated the SEVIS, the Student and Exchange Visitor Information System, or the SEVIS records for these students. And the only reason the government reinstated everybody back after a few weeks was several lawyers across the country, including we at the Murthy law firm, filed dozens and dozens of cases against the government. The current administration's attorneys realized there was such an onslaught of cases where the judges were basically reinstating, issuing temporary restraining orders, telling the government they could not do what they were doing, that they finally decided to completely cancel and reinstate all of those SEVIS records. So it was a big victory. But again, it's unfortunate because the only way we seem to get rights and we seem to be able to, thank goodness for the division of powers, the balance of powers, and the ability of the judiciary to stand independent and challenge and respond and ensure that the rule of law is followed in the largest, the oldest democracy in this world. And then, so I think the student issue has been somewhat resolved temporarily, at least with that respect to that issue. Regarding the visa revocations, visas, again, are only required when you travel out of the country and re-enter. You don't need a visa to be here. That's different. People mix up the word visa and status. Visa is what you have in your passport that allows you to come back into the US. Status, of course, is what you have with your I-94 card. And that's what was also terminated with the SEVIS terminations. The next topic that I was asked to touch upon, of course, was the CBP, or Customs and Border Protection. What happens if I'm traveling abroad? I'm a foreign national, whether it's a student, a person on H-1B status, maybe even, as the senator pointed out, unfortunately, a lawful permanent resident or green card holder, etc. And now even people, believe it or not, as US citizens are saying, hey, am I safe? What does it mean? What could happen to me, right? So what are we seeing at ports of entry? We're seeing a whole bunch of things happening. The Customs and Border Protection officers are telling people, whether it's on H-1B or students, like, okay, we see that there's some mismatch. They ask for your phone, they ask for your laptop, they ask for your iPad. And someone said, what if I don't want to give it to them? Well, you have to show it to them, because when you enter the country, we give up a lot of our rights. The only people who are exempt right now, and we weren't even exempt before, believe it or not, were US citizens. Even they were supposed to give up, because it used to be within 100 miles of the border, that you have pretty much, every time you enter the country, you're basically seeking admission, and therefore you can be examined. Your luggage can be searched, your phones, everything can be asked to be reviewed. And so when they see that, for example, an H-1B holder was talking about getting a commission, a splitting of the fee with the consulting company, which really isn't a violation if it is done in the manner where the person is still paid the H-1B prevailing wage. The CBP inspectors, the Customs and Border inspectors at the POE, the ports of entry, are telling the employees, oh, you're doing something illegal. You're fee splitting. You're not getting paid the H-1B salary, when they are getting paid the H-1B salary in almost all the cases. So we're going to cancel your visa. They cancel the visa. They even impose what's called a 5-year bar for what's called expedited removal, and tell them that you cannot not only not enter the US, we're putting you on the next flight. They take them in shackles, put them overnight in detention facilities unless there's a airline flight going back right away. Sometimes the flight goes back the next day, the following day, after 12 hours or 24 hours. You have to be sitting in detention, in a detention facility, and it is extremely scary and troubling, as you can imagine, for anybody, let alone a foreign national who has already maybe flown for 20, 24 hours or 48 hours on a flight, being now told you cannot enter the United States. If you get those documents, you can apply for a waiver. That's down the road. You can apply for the H-1 visa. If you're subject to a 5-year expedited removal order, then you need to get the consular officer needs to recommend the approval. The US Department of State headquarters must agree with it. And then CBP has to decide whether or not they will approve or deny it ultimately, the Administrative Review Office, ARO, right? The processing time for these waivers can be used to be 6 months, but now can be 1 year, 2 years, 3 years. Sometimes your petition expires and you still haven't gotten the approval. The expedited removal order, as I said, in H-1B cases, they even look at, oh, you were supposed to be working in San Jose, California, but now you've gone to San Diego and I don't see an amended petition or an amended LCA or amended petition filed on your behalf. So that's a huge, big problem. As I said, they can check your contents of your luggage. So what can you do as a person who's subject to this? Obviously, you want to keep copies of all your documents. You want to be able to review any statement that they make you sign as statements that you have made. And you definitely want to make sure that you know your rights. And I know there's a separate section where we're going to talk in today's panel about know your rights. You can try to negotiate with the CBP. A lot of times we tell people, if you get nothing else from today's discussion, understand there's something called withdrawal of admission. Officer, could I please get a withdrawal of my admission, which means you're not subject to the 5-year bar. You can withdraw your admission, buy your own ticket to go back to your home country, and then try, that way you're not subject to the 5-year bar, etc. Because expedited removal, you don't have judicial review. Most of the protections we talked about under the US Constitution do not apply to you, right? And once you withdraw your admission, you can always apply for a visa and come back and explain to the consular officer what happened. A lot of the other problems we see with CBP are mistakes they make on I-94 cards. Your status is determined by your I-94 card, so please make sure you look at your I-94 as soon as you come in. Go online to cbp.gov, check it, because if that date is wrong and differs from your latest H-1B petition approval or L-1 or whatever your status is in the US, you need to go to that CBP office and correct it. Because if you don't correct it and 6 months have passed, there's some arguments to be made that you're potentially subjecting yourself to a 3-year bar. If it's more than a year later, potential 10-year bar against you. That could completely mess up your ability to live in this country. I know they're sending me a notice that I've got like a minute or less than a minute. As I said, I could go on. There's a lot of other issues. Ask for secondary inspection, search of devices, strategy for your success, have your employer be available, be around so that they can answer questions if the CBP wants to confirm your employment. And as I said, lawful permanent residents or green card holders can be searched, including for your electronic equipment and electronics. And you do not have to sign the form 407, the record of abandonment of lawful permanent resident status, in spite of what the CBP officers now apparently are forcing a lot of green card holders or permanent residents to signing the 407 and telling them you need to abandon. And you can say, I'm sorry, officer, I will take my chances. I will go in front of a judge. And you can fight, and you will be able, in 9 out of 10 cases, to be able to fight it and hopefully win it. And if you don't be afraid to sue. Every single thing that we have done at the Murthy Law Firm on behalf of our clients by suing has resulted in success and victory. So don't lose hope. Don't lose faith. We still have the Constitution unless we all give it up by being afraid and refusing to challenge the government. There's nothing for you to be afraid. It is still a great country, and it is going to be great because of each of you as immigrants. America is a nation of immigrants, and each of you contributes to the greatness of this country and the wonderful talent that you bring. Thank you for the opportunity of sharing a few words.
Thank you, Sheela, very much for that insight. Sheela will be around for our live Q&A in just a bit, so please submit any questions that you have in the Q&A feature. But next, I want to move the conversation and introduce Robin Gurung, who is a powerful grassroots leader and advocate for refugee communities across the United States. Robin is the co-founder and co-executive director of Asian Refugees United, where he leads programs in Harrisburg, Pennsylvania, and organizes nationally in response to detention and deportation crises. Robin himself was born in Bhutan and raised in a refugee camp in Nepal before he resettled here in the United States in 2012 through the Refugee Resettlement Program. Drawing on 2 decades of lived experience, Robin organizes to empower refugee youth to become community change agents. He's also co-founded The Storytellers, a collective focused on displacement, identity, and belonging, and Camp for Emerging Leaders, an annual leadership program for Bhutanese organizers, artists, and activists. Tonight, he's going to share with us what's happening with the Nepali-speaking Bhutanese refugees that are being detained and deported, and what we can do to support them. So please join me in welcoming Robin.
Thank you, Chintan. Namaste and good evening, everyone. My name is Robin Gurung. I'm a former Bhutanese refugee and new co-executive director of Asian Refugees United. First of all, I want to thank Indian American Impact for hosting this critical conversation. I'm speaking before you not just as an advocate, but as someone whose community is under threat again. I'm part of Nepali-speaking Bhutanese American community, and we were forcibly expelled from Bhutan in the 1990s during the ethnic cleansing campaign of the Bhutan government. We spent decades in refugee camps in Nepal, waiting for safety. The US government gave us a second chance, an opportunity to resettle and rebuild our lives in this land. But now we are being displaced all over again. I'm here tonight to talk about something urgent and deeply personal to me and my community: the wrongful detention and deportation of Nepali-speaking Bhutanese Americans, many of whom have lived in the US for years as legal residents, neighbors, and contributors. Since March of this year, over 60 of our community members have been detained by ICE across states like Pennsylvania, Ohio, Texas, and New York. At least 24 have been deported via India to Bhutan, the same country that persecuted us, tried to ethnically eliminate us, and made us refugees. Within a day, Bhutan rejected them again and expelled them to India. At least 4 of these deportees ended up going back to the refugee camps in Nepal, where they were detained by the Nepali police for 27 days. Remaining 20 of these deportees are missing. They are now stateless. Their families, our families, are in anguish. Let me say that again. The US government deported stateless refugees who were brought to this country legally, people who had already survived a lifetime of displacement without explanation, without legal counsel, or without due process. We are terrified, we are grieving, and yes, we are very angry. People were taken from their homes, their workplaces, even courtrooms. Some were picked up by mistake. In one incident, ICE came banging on the doors of a family with children, searching for someone with a similar name. That child was so traumatized, they couldn't go to school for days. My question to all of us here is, how many times must we be displaced before we find a place where we belong, a place that we can all call our home? As Desis, whether we are from India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, Nepal, Bhutan, Sri Lanka, or elsewhere, we share stories of migration, of longing, of building new lives in unfamiliar places. That shared story gives us the power and the responsibility to stand with one another. When our community members disappear without warning, when stateless refugees are deported into countries that don't recognize them, when children are left behind, traumatized and afraid, it is not just a Bhutanese issue. It is a Desi issue, an American issue, and a human rights issue. We need your voices, we need your networks, and we need your outrage. So here is how you can help. Call your members of Congress, ask them to demand answers from ICE and DHS, connect us to lawyers, especially those with removable defense expertise. Pro bono or low-cost immigration help is urgently needed. Share our stories, speak out, lift up the stories of those who have been taken, and donate if you can. Help us protect and support impacted families. And most importantly, check in with each other. Let me end with this. We have survived decades of statelessness, war, and exile. We have built our lives from tents and bamboo huts to American neighborhoods. We are your co-workers, your neighbors, your classmates, your friends. We are Nepali-speaking Bhutanese Americans. We belong here, and we will not be silent. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Robin, for sharing your story and the story of so many refugees right now who are facing this in our community. And thank you for uh, sharing with our community, our larger community, South Asian community, how people can get involved and step in to be of support. So thank you so much for joining. And I know you'll be around to take some questions at the end as well. So I want to again share or remind folks, please put in your questions in the Q&A. Next, I want to introduce another incredible immigration attorney, Sowmya Rao, to provide additional clear practical guidance around what we need to do in terms of our immigrant rights. Sowmya has successfully represented clients across a wide range of industries from healthcare and engineering to the arts, and has been a fierce advocate for refugees, undocumented immigrants, and survivors of violence through her volunteer legal work in New York City. So she'll walk us through what all of tonight's updates mean in real term, what your rights are, what precautions to take, and how to be prepared. Following her remarks, Sowmya and the other speakers will be able to answer questions that are coming through the Q&A feature. So please keep them coming. And also a quick bit of disclaimer, while we may not be able to answer every question or provide individual specific legal advice, we will be sharing a resource guide to help you navigate next steps after this call as well. So without further ado, I'll hand it over to Sowmya to tell us about our rights.
Thank you, Chintan, and Indian American Impact for hosting this panel. So everybody is has all these anecdotal stories of immigrants, communities' experiences with local law enforcement, employers, landlords, Customs and Border Patrol. So I'm just I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'm going to pull a Sheela Murthy and try to get through it as quickly as possible. That was amazing. So let's talk about the most serious thing. What happens if ICE agents approach you, either in your home or your public or in public? In public, they're going to just call out your name. A lot of times they're not even dressed as police. So they'll just call out your name and ask you to confirm who you are. You don't have to confirm who you are. The first thing you can ask them is, am I free to go? And if they say yes, you can say, I would rather not speak with you, and walk away. If they say no, then you definitely have the right to remain silent. Now, when it comes to your home, a lot of times they'll knock and they'll pretend to be police, and they want you to identify yourself, or they'll say they want to talk about identity theft or an ongoing investigation. You do not have to let them in. They need a warrant to enter your home. You can ask for them to slip a warrant underneath the door, and it has to be signed by a judge. So make sure they're not tricking you into opening the door for them. They need a permission from an adult for them to enter your home. And so
Sowmya actually connected with that. What I've seen is that they actually pretend and just issue administrative warrants instead of judicial warrants signed by a judge, like you correctly pointed out. It'll be signed by a DHS officer rather than a judge, and that is not the same, doesn't carry the same weight. But most immigrants have no idea, because they assume a warrant is a warrant is a warrant.
That's right. So just make sure it is signed by a judge. Now, the other thing is, so if they're in your home, make sure you let them know that you do not consent to us, and ask for them to leave. Now, who's at risk? People who are here without immigration status. We're here without lawful immigration status, or people who are here as a lawful permanent resident, refugees, visa holders who have a certain criminal background. So what can you do to protect yourself? Make sure you have a lawyer. Make sure you have their number memorized. Make sure everybody has a number to call in this situation. And if you are at risk of being arrested, gather all of your documents. Make sure you have it in a safe place. Make sure someone knows where they are. So the next topic I want to move on to is alien registration requirement. This is something new that the Trump administration. So everybody who is age 14 or older, who is not registered either or fingerprinted either by applying for a U.S. visa, and who remains in the United States remains in the United States for 30 days or longer, must apply for registration and fingerprinting. And if you have a U.S. visa or have been in deportation proceedings, and you don't need to register because you are deemed already registered. We actually have no idea what the enforcement might look like. And I don't even know like who would be asking for this, but the regulations create criminal penalties for failing to carry proof. So if you're a lawful permanent resident, you must carry your original green card with you. And if you are here lawfully or unlawfully and not a green card holder, you must carry proof of your registration or a visa. Finally, I know that Sheela really touched upon this about traveling. So she mentioned the form 407, record of abandonment of lawful permanent resident status. Make sure you read what you are signing. You don't have to sign anything you don't want to, and make sure you are not voluntarily giving up your green card. And if you if they ask you any questions, you have to answer the questions establishing your identity and your permanent residence. You don't have to answer anything about your political religious beliefs. Turning over your phone. Yes, if you're a U.S. citizen, you don't have to turn off your phone. However, it does delay you immensely. They might detain you for a long period of time, and they will confiscate your possessions. They will confiscate your phone or your laptop, and you might not see that for several weeks or months. So, just make sure you take precautions. What are some reasons, if you are here, if you're a green card holder, why they might detain you? If you've been outside of the country for an extended period of time, like 6 months, they will detain you and ask you, you left for a long time, do you really intend to be a green card holder? If you have a criminal history, if you have engaged in illegal activity after having been part of the United States, and you've been convicted or admitted to the crime, and it's a fraud or some sort of involving moral turpitude, then or a controlled substance, you will be detained. And if you have failed to maintain a residency, meaning you've spent more time outside of the United States than you have inside, then they will detain you. What can you do to keep yourself from being detained? Keep absences short or apply for a re-entry permit before you go. Document your intentions to return, like either a mortgage or rental payments or a job. Make sure you let them know, I intend to come back, and then consult an attorney if you have a long-term visit outside of the country. And if you are not a U.S. citizen or a resident, a permanent resident, they do have the right to prevent you from coming into the country. So they do have the right to deny you entry into the country. And I think Sheela really touched on the laptops. I just want to make sure that, don't give them your password. You can put your password in if you want, if they ask for it, put it in. But if they do ask for the password, change the password as soon as you come back, get home. So those are the things I wanted to make sure you guys have that.
Amazing. Thank you, Sowmya, for sharing that information. And thank you, everyone, for bearing with us. I know we're running a little late, but I'm so glad that Sheela, Robin, and Sowmya are here to help answer some of these questions. I know we have a lot of pressing questions that are front of mind for our community in terms of the immigration environment. So I want to throw a couple of them out for any of you who want to take them to answer. And as I said earlier, we'll also be sharing a resource guide. I know we won't be able to get through everything, so please look out for a resource guide that we'll be sharing tomorrow morning to all the participants. So first question, and I know we get a variation of this all the time, also on this call, but over the last few months, should green card holders or even United States citizens avoid international travel?
Yeah, I've been getting, I get those questions all the time from my clients. So for citizens, really, they had to let you in. I mean, I can only tell you what the law allows. I know there's a lot of things that are in violation of the law that are occurring right now in the country, so that's a whole another issue. But lawful permanent residents who have a criminal record definitely jeopardize because because we have heard of, I have seen, I have been contacted by people who've been permanent residents for 35, 40 years. For whatever reason, they decided not to apply for citizenship, had a couple of different criminal issues, and have immediately taken and moved from state to state in federal in different detention facilities. And now we're trying to get them out. We don't do that work, but some cases it's known people or whatever, because it's, again, you have to be in each state. So the short answer is, if you have any type of criminal record, it is not advisable. If you think you have a squeaky clean record or your case has been dismissed, you still might be taken into secondary inspection, grilled about it. You may need to carry documents or proof that it's a non-issue, but they are throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and there's definitely risks for each of you. And by the way, when you talked about resources, in addition to all the other publicly available resources, for 31 years, we've been posting tons of like free articles and chat and forum and webinars and podcasts. It's just been our commitment to educate, empower, and enlighten the immigrant community. And that has been our motto from day one. Less than 0.1% hire us, and we're perfectly happy with that. It's about education and empowerment. So I know that all the other nonprofits have so much out there as well, and USCI's website.
Thank you, Sheela. I'll throw another one out here. This is something, I'll be honest, I hear this not just from the community, but from my family members quite a lot. I'm first generation. I was born in India and naturalized. That's the story of everybody in my family, my aunts, uncles, everybody. And the question I get all the time is, can they take away our citizenship? Like, is the denaturalization um, prospect serious? So can you all speak to what the denaturalization process is? Is that something that the community should be afraid of? And what can we do to sort of take precautions against it?
I'm happy to jump in. Again, I do that all the time for my clients who are asking, but if anybody else wants to jump in, you're more than welcome. Sowmya, or,
Go ahead. Go
okay.
ahead, Sheila.
Sure. So we are seeing cases. People, of course, we do consultations all day long, right? All of our attorneys. And so we are seeing more and more questions, especially if it's within the first 5 years, because after 5 years of being a lawful permanent resident, it is way harder to take away, to denaturalize, to take away your green card status. But within the first 5 years, you could lose your lawful permanent resident status, especially they're coming to people and saying, whoops, we approved your green card in error. In another case, the government made a mistake and approved it when the person's priority date wasn't current. And now they're saying, sorry, we approved it, so figure it out. But where we believe the green card was approved in error, so we're going to start putting you in deportation proceedings now, because the employer that did your green card was gone 5 years or 4 or 5 years ago. So it's all kinds of crazy stuff. Now, the common ones that we were hearing prior to this administration in the last 4 months were, of course, people who had, affiliation with Nazi Germany, or were definitely subject to the major denaturalization cases, were those kinds of cases. But in the Trump first administration, they created a separate unit for denaturalization against citizens that they felt either got it incorrectly, had criminal records, a whole bunch of things. And there is, like I think Senator Van Hollen said, attacking and dividing us, even with citizens. It's like, oh, you're a naturalized citizen, i.e. a second-class citizen. Oh, you were born, but you were born to immigrants. You're a person of color, so you're less than some of us, or lily white. It's stuff that you wouldn't have believed possible in America even 4 months ago, and it's happening.
Okay. And then thank you, Sheela. Here's another one that we get quite often, and there's two variations of this. Are you required to carry your green card at all times? I know someone else asked in the Q&A, are you required to carry your passport? all the time, even, when you're just out and about in your community, traveling to work or coming home from a sporting event or whatever, right? Like that's a question that we get a lot from the community, including in the chat tonight.
Sowmya?
You are required to carry your original green card. It's your ID. So you carry it with your license. In New York, we have the real ID now. So to get into a lot of places, I mean, I don't have the real ID, I have a regular license, so now I have to carry my passport everywhere. If I want to go into a federal building or go to the airport. So, if you're a green card holder, definitely yes.
And by the way, that was the law for a long time.
That's the law for a long time. Yeah, that's always been the case.
It's always the problem is nobody bothered with it, right? Ever. So now it's again what happened remember, right after 9/11, they started talking about registrations. I mean, some of us date ourselves, right? And so nobody bothered about registrations. Then they made it. Now it's carrying your ID. People are like, I'm shocked. What do you mean a permanent resident? Yeah, you have to carry your ID. It was always required. Nobody bothered to enforce it. Now the problem is, as Sowmya just pointed out, there are criminal penalties associated with it. So if you don't carry it, they could throw you into prison. They could do things to you that. So we tell people, why don't you just carry it? You carry your driver's license. It's the same size like a driver's license. Keep it with you. Carry it with you. If you're on an H-1B status, carry your H-1B petition original or a photocopy of your original petition, because some people are, I don't want to lose it. Well, keep a photocopy or keep a copy scanned in your phone, but you're supposed to be able to show it if anybody asks you for that information.
Yeah, you should, even if you are someone whose visa has expired and you're continuing to stay here in the country, you should carry some that goes towards the registration, that you should carry some evidence that you have been registered and you have been fingerprinted.
And even for H-1Bs, a lot of their employers file the extension, but the old petition has already expired, but you're legally allowed to stay and work for 240 days or 8 months. Most law enforcement don't know. I mean, right now, nobody knows the law. People are just like, oh, your status expired. We can put you on the next plane and deport you. No, you cannot. You maybe need to keep a copy of the law and the regulation that says I'm allowed to stay here, work, and live legally for stuff. So either have your lawyer or you print it out, go to a website like murthy.com or go to uscis.gov. Just keep proof, because you don't want to be in a weird situation where a law enforcement person who's, within quotes, many states are now trying to curry favor with the administration and saying, we are so proud to help deport all these illegal people. Well, not all of them are illegal anyway. And, it's just a whole another sort of issue.
Thank you. That's incredibly helpful information for the community to know. Robin, this is a question we got for you. Other than advocating with government officials and donating, how else can we raise awareness around your story, around what's happening with Bhutanese refugees right now?
I mean, reaching out to the community and, finding ways to uplift these stories, we would appreciate that.
And what also about maybe contacting your congressman registrar, because a lot of the administration wants to remove or sort of almost take away a lot of the TPS, the temporary protected status, refugee asylees. They want to almost discontinue because everybody is, within quotes, exploiting the system, sucking the economy dry. I mean, it's almost them versus us. There's no win-win. And so I think go voting. Hopefully people will vote, even those who can't, your family, your friends, your neighbors. I think Robin said, mobilizing, getting very, very engaged and involved. I feel united we stand. We are more powerful because a lot is mind. It's mind over matter. I'm a true believer that if you look at like, oh, I'm pretty much done. As immigrants, I have no right. Then you'll be giving up rights. Someone said, right? We all give up rights when we think we don't have any. So don't ever be one of those voices that is afraid and nervous. Stand up, because by standing up, demanding things, show the papers. Sowmya said, right? Ask for the papers, ask for proof. Be one of those troublesome squeaky wheel gets the oil. Be one of those annoying, pesky people that people stop annoying, stop taking you for granted and thinking they can exploit you and take advantage of you merely because you're an immigrant. This country was built on the backs of immigrants. Immigrants are, I think, a big part of the reason this country is the greatest country on earth. And the day we forget our own history, I think we're going to dig our own grave.
I want to add a quick thing, one more thing. We have a solidarity letter going on by one of our partner organization, and we would appreciate, if you can forward that letter to any organizations who could support us. And Miko Lee in the chat has shared that
Yeah.
link.
Yeah, please, on the chat, you will see the solidarity letter that Robin is talking about, and we'll be sure to include it in the follow-up as well. I know we're over time, and I want to be mindful of everyone's the panelist time, everyone on the call. I know it's the evening. So I wanted to just quickly for Sowmya, Sheela, and Robin, if you could just I know you've given such amazing advice and your thoughts this evening, but one short piece of advice, like the most important thing our community should be mindful of. If you want to share that before we close out, and then I have a few things I want to share with our guests before we wrap for the evening.
Perfect. All I can say is, again, as I said, believe in yourself, believe in your voice. If you think you are nobody and you have no rights, you will give it up, because anything else that we can tell you, what Sowmya said, Robin said, I shared, Senator spoke, those are great tips. Those are fabulous, valuable information. But if in the core of your soul and in your being, you believe that, you know what? There are laws. This country is a nation of laws. There's a rule of law. There's a constitution. I am entitled to rights. I have done nothing wrong. And even, by the way, if you've done something wrong, we're all human. We've all made some mistakes. But if you have serious criminal record, you're certainly subject to deportation/removal. But you still have rights, and you still have to go through a court of law. And you're supposed to go through that whole process. They can't just put you on the next plane and kick you out as if you're used trash. Even used trash is required to be followed. Certain rules have to be followed when you're recycling your trash. So those are my sort of thing. Believe and then unite. Like Robin said, we can all united we stand, and united we are more powerful.
I would add that I agree wholly with Sheila. And I would add that you have to educate yourself. Don't assume, as she said, immigrants are so willing, not just immigrants, everybody is willing to give up their rights when you think you don't have any. Don't assume. You have rights. Educate yourself on the rights and educate yourself on how you can protect yourself. Speak to a lawyer. Make sure you have a script of what you say. Make sure you have all your documentation. Make sure you protect yourself and your family at all times.
Yeah, echoing Sheila and Sowmya, I would say they're using fear as a tactic. It might feel confusing and fearful, but I would say surround yourself with loved ones, people who care for you. United, we can fight this. Thank you.
Thank you all so much for your time tonight, for your expertise, for your deep commitment to our communities. And I want to thank everyone who joined as well and asked such thoughtful questions. Your engagement is what makes spaces like this powerful, and it also gives us that community, that surrounding that Robin was just talking about as well. As I mentioned earlier, we'll be sending out a follow-up email tomorrow with a resource guide that includes key takeaways, links, and tools for staying informed and protected. If you're part of an organization that has additional resources that you'd like us to include, please email them to sarah@iaimpact.org. I'm sure Sarah will be dropping that email in the chat as well by early tomorrow morning. So before we close out, I want a few calls to action. Please follow Indian American Impact on social media to stay up to date about future events and advocacy opportunities. Those specific handles should be on your screen. We will also share updates via email as well. Next, we have a community hub on WhatsApp. Obviously, our community is on WhatsApp, so please join our Impact Community Hub. You can scan the QR code on the slide or click on the link in the chat. But once you're in, you'll be able to join specific groups based on topic areas or your location. Another way for you to be in community in these times. And then finally, I want you all to mark your calendars. We're thrilled to officially launch the registration tonight for our Impact Summit and Gala, our annual Impact Summit and Gala, which will be taking place in Washington, D.C. on September 16th and 17th. This is a two-day event featuring conversations on immigration and so many more issues that are impacting our communities. And then on day two, we'll actually be hosting a day of action where you'll have a chance to get a hands-on training and meet directly with your members of Congress to advocate for the issues that matter. Early bird registration is live right now. You can go to iaimpact.org/summit to register. Also a QR code on your screen as well. So once again, I want to thank our incredible panelists. Thank the Senator Chris Van Hollen, Sowmya Rao, Sheela Murthy, and Robin for joining us tonight and sharing these incredibly important insights on an issue that is clearly impacting our communities on immigration. So let's continue building power together, and please stay in touch and have a great night.
Thank you
Thank
all.
you so
Thank you,
much.
Chintan, and thank you,
Thank you, everybody.
Take care. Good night.
Bye.